Hey, my name's Ryan. I did my HSC in 2019, and One Night the Moon was one of the prescribed texts that I had for English. So in this video, I'm going to go through a series of quotes relating to a particular topic, in this case, the universal significance of family and life. I'm going to go through a series of quotes, analyze them for you, and then show you how I used them in an example paragraph that I actually used in my HSC English essay. So first clip is the One Night the Moon lullaby at the very start of the film. Let's take a look.
The dream is to come for a ride. One night the moon came a-wheeling by on a big bike right across the night sky. One night the moon came wheeling by, called all the sleepers to come for a ride. One night the moon came choo-chooing by on a big train right across the night sky. One night the moon came choo-chooing by, called all the sleepers to come for a ride.
So we're introduced into this scene with the camera gliding through the bedroom window. It's this very kind of ethereal cinematography. Ethereal cinematography. And it has the effect of making the scene feel almost fairy tale-like. It doesn't quite feel real. It feels like we're in a bit of a fantasy land. Ethereal, it's kind of slow. Like I said, I like to describe it as gliding. And cinematography just means the art of camera work is the best way to describe it. So it has this connotation of fairy tale like. That's the only way I can think to describe it. The first thing we see is that Rose and Emily, let's just circle them as one. Rose and Emily, we see this very close body language. They're very close to each other. Their heads are tilting towards each other. And then we immediately know from just how close they are that this shows that they are most likely mother and daughter, right? Most likely mother and daughter. It shows a very intimate connection between the two. Very intimate connection between the two. And then 3, we see the father enter into the scene. We're not told directly that he's the father, but because he's also intimate with both Rose and Emily, we can assume that he is the father. And the other important aspect in this scene is how they're singing, or what they're singing. They're singing this lullaby, right? It's a very light, simple lullaby. And they're singing in harmonic unison. Singing in harmonic unison. Meaning that they're all singing the same notes. There's no harmony, there's no complexity in the melody. They're all just on the da 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 da. They're singing in harmonic unison. And it's over a major chord progression. A major chord progression. And basically what that means, it's that kind of very simple, happy sounding chord progression. Actually, give me a second. So what do I mean by major chord progression? In simple terms, I just mean the chords that sound very happy. There's no minor chords. There's a lot of happy sounding chords. One night the moon came rolling down on a great ship right across the night sky. One night the moon came rolling by, called all the sleepers to come for a ride. Right, so it's very happy sounding. It's very simple. It's very indicative of a child's lullaby. Okay, so it has these connotations of being warm, being positive, and being simple. And obviously the lyrics are very, very repetitive, right? One night the moon, blah, 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 blah. And that's just repeated over and over and over again. So the entire point of this scene is to just establish these 3 characters as mother, father, daughter, right? It's just to show that they're a nuclear family and they all love each other very much and everything's happy, at least so far. Okay, and our next clip is the scene with the Aboriginal family. Let's take a look. So a similarity in that scene was that the music that was playing was also a major chord progression, right? It was also a major chord progression. And that, again, had the effect of having a connotation of happiness, had a connotation of being lighthearted. But the main, so that's what's similar between the scene of the Aboriginal extended family and the European nuclear family. But although the music was similar in tone, similar in nature, what's the big difference that we notice in this scene? And that the big difference that we notice is that it's like I said, an extended family. It's a much larger group. It's an extended family as opposed to the nuclear family of the Europeans, of the Ryan family. And perhaps I should have written that up here actually. So we can, so we have mother, daughter, father. That's nuclear. Well, it's not necessarily daughter, but like mother, father, children. That's a nuclear family. Whereas this is more extended. We can presumably these people aren't all directly related. There's probably a friend there. There's probably a cousin there. There's probably a father here. You know, they're not all, in all likelihood, they're not all from the one family. It's just the Aboriginal culture with regards to family is more, at least in this film, is shown to be more open, more accepting, less defined. And so that speaks to the difference between the cultures. That's, it's not exactly a juxtaposition because they're not, like these scenes aren't shown side by side in the film, but it's very much, it shows a contrast between the European mindset with regards to family and the Aboriginal mindset with regards to family. Okay, so next quote. This is the funeral for Emily and Ryan. Let's take a look. Pray, oh God, till I am holy until this earthly heart of me flows with the fun divine. In the first two quotes, we had the European nuclear family identity represented here. In the second quote, we had the Aboriginal extended family identity represented here. And in this quote, we have a congregation of both of those identities as well as a kind of religious identity here. So first we have the European identity here, and these are all presumably family and friends of Rose. This is the European identity. And the European identity is also kind of represented by the stringed bass note in the soundtrack. You just hear this wah. I'll play it now. You listen, you hear like a cello, and that instrument is itself representative of the European identity. So then we also have Albert and his wife here representing the Aboriginal identity. The other thing that represents the Aboriginal identity is the singing of Albert's wife. And then thirdly, we have religion, presumably Catholicism, because Jim Ryan sounds like an Irish name. We have a priest here, and obviously we have the cross over here over Emily and Ryan's grave, right? So this is all religious iconography, and I think at the front he may have been holding a Bible. I can't remember, but anyway, so there are these three kind of representations of groups here. We have the European group, we have the Aboriginal group, and we have the religious group. You could argue that Catholicism is kind of like It's kind of like a subset of the European identity, but still there are like three distinct identities here, all congregating together for the same purpose. And what is that purpose? They're mourning for the death of a daughter and a husband. And everybody, regardless of what their identity, recognizes that it's a tragedy, right? Everyone here, she's sad, she's sad, she's sad, he's sad. She, I think, is sad. This dude's sad. This person's sad. They're all sad because everyone, regardless of their race, regardless of their religion, regardless of whatever, understands the universal significance of family and human life, right? So the thing that we have represented in this scene is a common humanity identity, if you want to call it that. Let's just say common humanity. It entails an understanding of the significance of family and the significance of human life. Okay, so how would we use these three quotes in a paragraph? Well, this is an example paragraph that I actually used in my HSC. I'll read it to you and then I'll notate the structure and some important points. The importance of family and human life is a universal aspect of all cultural identities. Despite the differences between the European and Aboriginal cultures, one thing they share in common is the importance of family and human life. At an early point in the film, a superb use of cinematography is displayed as slow, ethereal camera movement is used to glide through Emily's bedroom window. The responder, which is just a fancy way of saying the person responding to the text, so the viewer in this case, the responder is presented with an intimate scene of Emily and Rose lying in bed with their bodies and heads tilted towards each other. This use of body language serves to express their intimacy as mother and daughter. As the father enters the room, the three sing a soft lullaby in musical harmonic unison over a simple major chord progression. This use of musical language cultivates a positive, warm mood that expresses their identity as a nuclear family. At a later point in the film, a gathering of Indigenous people is displayed inside Albert's home. The use of mise-en-scène shows a large group of mothers, fathers, children, and friends all together, displaying a form of extended family identity. Through a repeated use of a musical language motif, one member of the group plays a simple major chord progression on a banjo, while harmonica can be heard in the background. This also forms a happy, light-hearted atmosphere in which the extended family Aboriginal people exist in. This scene provides a clear parallel to the lullaby scene as it conveys a distinction in the way family is conceived between the two cultures. For the Europeans, the family is portrayed as nuclear, mother, father, child, separated from other nuclear families. Contrasting cultural identities are displayed through the use of visual language, showing the Aboriginal family as extended and open to others. In the final scene of the movie, a funeral is being held for Emily and Ryan. Three cultural identities are represented in this scene. The first is European, the second is Aboriginal, and the third is Catholic. So I say Catholic because Jim Ryan sounds like an Irish name, and I assume that an Irish migrant would be Catholic, generally speaking. The European identity is represented by Rose and other white people who are presumably her family, as well as the droning string instrument playing a single bass note in the soundtrack. The Indigenous identity is represented by Albert and his wife, who is singing over the music. The Catholic identity is represented by the priest, whose clothing indicates this, as well as the cross marking Emily and Ryan's grave. This congregation of identity represents the common humanity between us all. Everyone in the scene, regardless of cultural identity, understands the suffering that Rose is experiencing with the loss of her husband and daughter. Through the use of music, costuming, mise-en-scène, the final scene of the movie conveys the message that the significance of family and human life is understood universally across all cultures. Okay, what's the structure here? So as with most of my essay paragraphs, I start with an idea sentence. You might hear this as a conceptual statement from your teachers. It's basically you're stating an idea that, although maybe represented within the text, is not constrained to only within the text. It's an idea that can exist in the wider world. So note that I don't actually make reference to the One Night the Moon text or any of the characters or any of the specific themes in this idea statement. I just said the importance of family and human life is a universal aspect of all cultural identities. That idea can exist without One Night the moon existing. It's an idea in itself. It exists in the wider world. Always start your paragraphs off with just a general idea statement. And then the next one, I link it to the text a little bit. Link to text. Despite the differences between the European and Aboriginal cultures, one thing they share in common is the importance of family and human life. Now, that's not a super direct link to the text, but I said European and Aboriginal cultures, so it's certainly alluding to it at the very least. So I've mentioned European here, I've mentioned Aboriginal here, and over here I've said they share in common is the importance. Actually, let's just say share in common. Now, this link to text sentence is very important. And the idea sentence is important as well. The idea sentence kind of gives your reader context to the idea that you're trying to convey throughout the rest of this paragraph, right? So that's important for the context of the reader. The link to text sentence is very important for you as well, more so for you than the reader, I think, because what I've done here is set up the structure for the main meat of the paragraph, right? So I've got the differences between the European. That bit, European, is this bit here, is this section of the paragraph here, right? European. And I should say European nuclear family, perhaps. So despite the differences between the European and the Aboriginal cultures, Aboriginal, that's the next section here. Aboriginal extended family. Okay, and then last but not least, share in common. So this final section of the paragraph here is about common humanity between all three of the cultural identities represented in the scene, right? And then the last sentence here is just a standard conclusion in which what you're essentially doing is restating the idea statement. So in the idea statement, I said, the importance of family and human life is a universal aspect of all cultural identities. And then in the second half, in the latter half of the conclusion, I say, significance of family and human life is understood universally across all cultures. So look how similar those, the idea is the same there, right? Importance of family and human life, universal cultural identities. Significance of family and human life, universally cultures, right? I'm stating the same idea, but I'm phrasing it in a different way. That sounds like a more of a concluding statement than an opening statement. Okay. And the common humanity can obviously be seen in the words that I use here. Everyone in the scene. So that's how I integrated these quotes into a paragraph while talking about the universal significance of family and life. So a couple tips. In the description, I've linked a video on how to study effectively, not made by me, made by this doctor in Cambridge or Oxford, I think. It's really good. I recommend you watch it, not just for English, but for all your courses. Extremely, extremely important that you're studying effectively rather than studying hard. I have multiple other videos on One Night the Moon. I have a video discussing the cultural perspectives on land. I have a video discussing racism and prejudice, and a video on how musical language is used in this film to convey meaning, and how visual language is used in this film to convey meaning. So I recommend you find your own quotes or use these ones, whatever. Try find your own quotes that also speak to this topic and write a paragraph of your own. Hope this was useful. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.